The C8 Corvette is getting pretty long in the tooth, if you know what I mean. And because of that, the C9 Corvette rumors are swirling all over the internet. And we just got an article from Motor Trend that says the C9 Corvette might be closer than you think. Let's talk about it. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the vlog. Thanks for pressing play. Today we are talking all about the incoming C9 Corvette. Yes, it is that time that the C9 Corvette is becoming even more real by the day. And if it's anything like the previous generations, Chevrolet has been testing and perfecting the C9 for the last couple years right under our noses, and we haven't even noticed. Most likely in a C8 Corvette wide body style somewhere in Michigan and in your neighborhood, basically, but you wouldn't even know what they're testing because it would just look like a C8 Corvette. They've done this in the past, of course, with the C8. They actually tested it in a couple different Holden bodies just to make sure that nobody knew what they were doing with these things, but ultimately we're able to test a mid-engine Corvette without us even knowing. So odds are very good they're working on the C9 currently, but Motor Trend is talking about some of their sources that say that this car is coming as a 2030 model. Now, this is something we've discussed on the channel a couple different times. We speculated 2029 or a 2030 release date for the C9 Corvette because there was a good chance that the C8 was going to run roughly 10 model years. GM put a lot of money into the development of the C8 Corvette, so it makes sense that they would run it as long as possible. And of course, the C8 Corvette is going to be a major influence for the C9 Corvette. It's going to be an evolution instead of a total reimagining like the C8 Corvette was over the C7. So the C9 is going to be very similar in a lot of aspects. It's obviously still going to be a mid-engine car, and we speculate at this point that the base entry model engine for the C9 is likely to be a version of the LS6 we just recently got for the 2027 model year Stingrays and Grand Sports, only tweaked here and there to show probably closer to 600 horsepower, which is going to be awesome. But let's talk about what Motor Trend has discovered here. Their article has a title that says, "A new restyled C9 Chevrolet Corvette is closer than you think. From fresh styling to updated V8s and future hybrids, here's what's coming for the next Corvette." And they give us our first image of what they think the C9 Corvette's going to look like. Now, if you guys think you've seen something like this before, you kind of have. The article actually talks a lot about how the C9 Corvette is going to be heavily influenced by the CX Corvette that we've seen some photos of from Chevrolet. Now, this car, the CX, actually does exist. It is a real live car that has been at car shows and things like that that Chevy has shown off. But when given the information early right here on this channel from Chevrolet about the CX Corvette, they specifically asked that the CX was not referred to as the C9 Corvette. I just took that as probably because the CX was most likely going to be more like the C10 or C11 Corvette, but there is a good chance that it is actually going to be the C9, and they just didn't want anybody to really put that together just yet, because these photos from Motor Trend, which are most likely renderings, of course, look a lot like the CX, which is, of course, not a bad thing if you're looking for more kind of Ferrari styling. This looks very similar to some Ferraris I've seen matched together with some Corvette language and things like that, but either way, this could be really cool to see. So anyway, the article goes on to say, the world's longest running sports car returns for its 9th generation in 2030. The C9 2030 Chevrolet Corvette will be the second iteration of the mid-engine Corvette and the product of many hard-earned lessons from the C8. The biggest changes will be visual. The C8 Corvette, for all of its merits, is neither a classically pretty Corvette nor a well-proportioned mid-engine sports car. We can agree to disagree there because I think the C8 is pretty nice. But anyway, furthermore, owners weren't in love with the closed-off cockpit feel of the cabin, and that was, of course, an issue that was partially rectified by the 2026 Corvette facelift. According to our sources, the new C9 Corvette will be heavily influenced by a GM design center-penned 2025 Corvette CX concept, with softer, more cohesive lines that recall the Coke bottle hips of earlier front-engine Corvettes without sacrificing the performance progress made by the transition to mid-engine layout. Why it matters? For the past 30 years or so, the Corvette has served as a high-performance proving ground for the rest of General Motors technologies, such as magnetic ride control and performance traction traction management that has been developed and perfected by various iterations of the Corvette. The C8 in particular has been a tour de force from an engineering perspective, led by the development of both naturally aspirated and turbocharged versions of the world's largest flat plane crank V8 in the Corvette Z06 and ZR1 respectively. Electrification was also introduced to the Corvette lineup for the first time in both the E-Ray and ZR1X, and also now the Grand Sport X coming soon. Although we don't expect the C9 Corvette to go full electric at launch, we absolutely do expect to continue seeing it on the bleeding edge of the performance envelope during its life cycle. This is something else we discussed heavily on the channel here, that very, very likely the C9 is going to lean heavily into the hybrid performance aspects like the E-Ray and the Grand Sport, moving into later performance variants of the C9, because at some point you're going to run out of traction with just rear-wheel drive. So the easiest way for them to get all-wheel drive would be some sort of hybrid assist motor in the front, like they've been doing with some of the C8 Corvettes. Then we get another picture of what Motor Trend is trying to tell us that this car might look like. And for some of you guys, this might be a little bit more of a recall or a throwback to some of the older Corvettes, because it looks like we might be getting some roundish taillights in the back. Now, the car design here definitely has almost a Maserati MC20-esque look about it. So obviously, like I said, these are renderings. I'm not 100% sure how accurate they are, but the car, to me, looks okay. It looks a little bit chopped up or a little bit added on. So I'm guessing it's not going to look exactly like this, but the taillights could be interesting. I've heard a lot of people ask for the return of round taillights. And even though these aren't perfectly round, they're definitely more Corvette-esque in that aspect. Obviously, we see the Corvette badge on the back bumper kind of sticking off the bumper as if it's on a standoff, Corvette lettering underneath, and the return of the reflectors in the diffuser down below, and of course, a center exit exhaust with big diffuser fins. This is also another spot where I doubt we'll get something like that, because Chevy seems to really not like diffuser fins for some reason. They almost never put them on their cars. And every time I've seen a Corvette with diffuser fins, they always look significantly better than without the diffuser fins. And it's like Corvette just forgets to put those on there. From what we can see of the rear hatch area, it kind of looks similar to the C8 Corvette. Of course, it is going to be a mid-engine, so that rear end is going to be longer than the front, just like every other mid-engine car you see. The intakes look like they're down lower on the rocker than on the C8 Corvette currently, but still could, of course, feed the air into that engine with ease. The wheels are a pretty interesting design. This, again, kind of looks like something from the CX concept, but still not a bad look. I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts are, though, guys. Let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think of the look of this car? If we were to get the C9 tomorrow and it looked just like this, would you be happy with it? Let me know. Moving on with the Motor Trend article, the platform and powertrain, there's still a lot taking shape when it comes to what motivates the C9 Corvette. So the only sure thing is that the C9 will ride on an updated and hopefully lighter version of the C8's architecture. Despite 2 of the 3 recent Corvette concepts being envisioned as a 4-motor EV hypercar, we expect the C9 to stick to a traditional pushrod V8, though we could see a fully electric powered Corvette at some point in the early 2030s. I'm not a big fan of fully electric, but at the same time, like I said, we are most likely to see a lot of performance hybrids in this lineup, and I do think we're going to get a slightly retooled version of the LS6 as an entry-level engine, just because it's going to be retooled enough that they'll call it a different version, maybe start over at an LS1, and it's going to be somewhere around high 5s to low 6s in the horsepower rating, if I had to guess. The new 2027 Corvette Grand Sport marked the debut of Chevy's new LT6 6.7-liter V8, which outputs 535 horsepower and 520 pound-feet of torque, and it's paired with an 8-speed dual-clutch automatic. We strongly suspect that will be the powertrain we see in the base Stingray when the C9 starts turning wheels in 2029 as a 2030 model. So basically, the article said exactly what we've been saying on the channel here for a couple months now. Even though they made an error in the article and said LT6 instead of LS6, we have been talking about this on the channel for quite some time now about the LS6 most likely being something that will start the C9 off and almost have the LS6 be kind of a beta test mode currently in the C8 Corvette. With all the changes they made with the LS6 engine, the fact that it was only able to make 40 more horsepower kind of tells me that they purposely held it back a little bit so they could give it more horsepower when the C9 comes out relatively easily. We also expect the usual slate of higher performance variants with the more powerful hybrids, hybrids, perhaps one with dual front motors versus the single now found in the ZR1X and Grand Sport X, added to the traditional mix of Z51, Grand Sport, Z06, and ZR1 models. The estimated starting price would be somewhere around $78,000 all the way up to $220,000, of course, going through all those performance variants. If I had to guess, we're probably going to be right around 70 grand for the entry level C9. The expected sale date would be summer 2029, of course, with the likely constraints and delays in the build date, probably pushing it closer to fall of 2030 if it follows suit with the C8 Corvette. So that's pretty much it, guys. We get our first kind of look into the C9 here from our friends over at Motor Trend. The images we're showing here, of course, are renderings, so it could look just like this, or it could look absolutely nothing like this. So kind of use your best judgment here, but I do think the styling is probably not far off. If I had to guess, it's very Ferrari-esque, and that seems to be kind of what Corvette leans into most of the time. The C7 looked a lot like a Ferrari. The C8 looks very much like a Ferrari. It makes sense the C9 would as well. And this one looks more like a Ferrari and an MC20 kind of smashed together. So either way, let me know what your thoughts are down below. Do you agree that this will likely start out with some form of a tweaked LS6 engine? Do you think it's going to look anything like these pictures? Let me know down below what your thoughts are. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. Smash the thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And as always, stay obsessed.